Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hawks Latest, your number one source for news, updates, rumors, opinions, and you guessed it, the latest and the greatest regarding the Atlanta Hawks. I'm your host, Zach Langley, aka Langley ATL, and today we are going to be diving into a few of the latest developments in the Hawks front office search, something that's been ongoing for several weeks now, including the potential return of a former exec. We're also going to look at the Hawks' hopes of retaining unrestricted free agent Caris LeVert, who they acquired at the deadline this past season. Some intriguing trade possibilities with the New Orleans Pelicans, a familiar trade partner the Hawks have worked with on several occasions over the past few seasons. And then we're going to close things out with Jeff Teague's bold claim about the 2015 Hawks versus this year's historic OKC Thunder team. So we've got a lot to cover. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the Atlanta Hawks are currently undergoing significant changes in their front office. As all of you know, they parted ways with Landry Fields back in April. The organization has been actively searching for a new president of basketball operations since his departure. They believe in Onzi Soleil going forward, but they want to bring in another voice in that front office. So Mark Stein of the Stein Line reports that Danny Ferry, a name familiar to many Hawks fans, has emerged as a legitimate candidate to take over as a senior advisor to Onzi Soleil. It's not necessarily for the president's job, but it's still a very important role in the front office as someone with a voice when it comes to making these moves that determine the future outlook of the franchise. So Ferry, who is currently a consultant for the San Antonio Spurs, he previously ran the Hawks front office for a few seasons. Back in the 2010s. His tenure did end up ending under controversial circumstances after he ended up making racially insensitive remarks during a scouting report discussion involving Luol Deng, who we all know. He stepped down and then later worked with the Pelicans in both advisory and interim general manager roles, and now he's currently with the Spurs. So now, over a decade removed from that incident, he's reportedly been involved in the Hawks interview process, signaling that the organization might be open to his return in a strategic role. Not with the most say in the front office, but someone who can act as kind of a guide with the experience that he has. While they have been also interviewing high-profile candidates such as Elton Brand, Calvin Booth, Monte McNair, and then two very important names, Masai Ujiri, and even NBA agent Alex Saratzis, that of Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's possible that they could pivot from hiring a full president, instead, restructure the decision-making group with some experienced advisors. This would align with the exits of, Grant Liffman, who was the vice president of pro personnel, and executive advisor Chris Emmons, who, are both on their way out. It's clear that the Hawks are looking to reshape their front office with a blend, I guess, of innovation and institutional memory, experience, and leadership. And, some of these guys might be the final piece of that puzzle to really send this front office into a state where they're comfortable making these bold moves as we, go into the next era of Hawks basketball. So turning to free agency, Atlanta actually faces a crucial decision this offseason, something that hasn't been talked about a lot. How far are they willing to go to retain Caris LeVert? So the 30-year-old wing did play a vital role off the bench after arriving via trade from Cleveland in February in exchange for DeAndre Hunter. In his time with Atlanta, he averaged nearly 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists per game, while shooting a pretty efficient 48% from the floor, and decent from three. His two-way contributions were instrumental in several of the team's close wins down the stretch. He's a very underrated defender, and he did work well with Trey in that backcourt in late game scenarios where the Hawks needed a clutch bucket. He was a real bucket getter, and someone that the Hawks do want to bring back. Now, according to Hoops Wire, the Hawks do want to keep LeVert, and obviously, I have also heard whispers of this that they obviously want to keep LeVert, but they are aware that there will be outside suitors. Detroit and Brooklyn, both teams with a lot of cap space heading into the offseason, are believed to be among the interested parties. The Pistons are a particularly strong contender given LeVert's past relationship with JB Bickerstaff from their time together in Cleveland, and then Brooklyn, of course, was where LeVert began his NBA career. played super well, and then, earned a spot in the NBA as a rotational player moving forward with other teams. He went to the Pacers after his time in Brooklyn. But here's the catch. Both of those franchises do have significantly more salary cap flexibility than Atlanta. So while the Hawks hold LeVert's bird rights and really can offer him a very competitive deal and really anything he wants, it remains unclear if they are willing to engage in a bidding war. Obviously, that there are more financial restrictions with Atlanta than these two other teams. So ultimately, many league insiders do expect LeVert to at least test the market, but end up back in Atlanta. And this is what I expect. However, if he receives an offer that's much higher than what Atlanta's willing to pay, he might be on his way out. I mean, if still, Atlanta will have to balance financial prudence with retaining a key contributor who fit into the system seamlessly. Now, if Atlanta does lose Caris LeVert, or simply wants to bolster their roster further, which is obviously something they're going to be interested in doing as we approach next season, keep an eye on a team that the Hawks have negotiated with previously, the New Orleans Pelicans. So, according to multiple reports, no player on the Pelicans roster is considered untouchable. I mean, this doesn't come as a surprise, but I mean, players like Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, even former Hawk. I mean, obviously he's not a target to, for the Hawks this offseason for several reasons, but their whole team is untouchable, and that flexibility could make New Orleans a prime trade target, prime trade partner this offseason. So without further ado, let's look at some targets. So this might be a little unpopular, but CJ McCollum actually could be a savvy addition. He's going to be on the final year of his $30 million contract, and he might not be too happy with it, but he would be good in a six-man role. Obviously, I don't want to start him and Trae Young next together due to both of them being very small and, they're not similar players, but they both struggle on the defensive end, and both are high volume offensive generators. He could be a good off the bench piece, something that the Hawks would need if LeVert departs. I mean, this is very case scenario, because if the Hawks re-sign LeVert, there's really no reason to go ahead and bring in CJ McCollum, but it's an interesting thing to think about if Caris LeVert were to leave in free agency. Another guy that is probably a long shot is Trey Murphy. His three-point shooting and his switchable defense would make him an absolutely ideal fit in Atlanta's rotation. However, even though no one's untouchable on the Pelicans roster, I find it very unlikely that they would part ways with Trey Murphy, who averaged over 21 points this last season on great efficiency and great high-volume three-point shooting. Now, this is when it starts to get a little interesting and a little more realistic in terms of Atlanta's exact situation. Herb Jones, one of the league's premier defenders, I mean, absolute lockdown. He's on a team-friendly contract and could be acquirable without breaking the bank if the Pelicans were really trying to go in that other direction. This is someone who the Hawks absolutely should show interest in and have shown interest in the past. Kelly Olynyk also could serve as a reliable backup big, and Jose Alvarado, bringing him in, he could bring some grit and some pressure as a backup point guard. And I mean, not to really take over Kobe Buffkin's role, but to definitely apply pressure as someone who would be great in the locker room and someone who could really teach some awesome defensive instincts to some of the young guys. I mean, he's obviously a young guy himself, but he has some experience locking down some of the league's best. So, the Hawks, as I've stated previously, they already have a history of dialogue with the New Orleans Pelicans. I mean, don't forget they acquired Dyson Daniels at the end of last season. They came very close to acquiring Brandon Ingram in a multi-team deal at this year's trade deadline. That obviously didn't go through, but that was something that got very close. And, it's clear that the Hawks and Pelicans have a good connection when it comes to these trades. And in my opinion, they've been absolutely fleecing them. And that's been good to see. It brings confidence in, this resume going forward. So there's smoke here, and it might not be long before we see some fire. So now moving on to a bit of a more playful story. Jeff Teague, we all know Jeff Teague, former All-Star and obviously key member, the floor general of the 2014-15 Atlanta Hawks that won 60 games. He actually stirred the pot recently with some bold commentary in his podcast that has recently blown up, and it's gotten incredible views because it's super entertaining. He claimed that the 2015 Hawks team would sweep this year's Oklahoma City Thunder squad, led by, obviously, the MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now, let's remember, that Hawks team did go 60-22. They had 4 All-Stars. They played beautiful, team-oriented A beautiful team-oriented brand of basketball. The only thing that their downfall was obviously injuries and a LeBron James-led Cavaliers team. Prime LeBron in the Eastern Conference Finals. So you could argue that any other year they would have won the championship. I mean, they might have lacked that real star power that obviously the Thunder have in SGA. But they certainly would have put up a good fight. I don't know if Teague is completely right about them sweeping them, but here's what he had to say. He said, "We definitely would have won a chip this year. We played like them, and, SGA isn't like LeBron James." He went on to argue that the Hawks could easily contain a guard like SGA, while their main weakness in 2015 was defending elite wings like LeBron, especially after Thabo Sefolosha had broken his leg, and, all these guys were getting hurt, and, there were just more stuff than basketball going on around then. I mean, it's a fun debate. And while the 2024-25 Thunder are super dynamic and deep and are probably about to win the 2025 NBA championship, it's hard to dismiss the cohesion and talent of that 2015 Hawks squad, who really surprised the NBA that season and had 4 All-Stars and won 60 games. So that wraps up today's episode of Hawks Latest. Whether it's the front office shakeup, free agency drama with a guy like Caris LeVert, some trade whispers around the New Orleans Pelicans, or Jeff Teague's hot takes on the Club 520 podcast, the Hawks are never short on storylines, and it's going to be a busy offseason, so be sure to subscribe, drop a like, and let me know in the comments. Would you bring Danny Ferry back? Is Caris LeVert worth a big offer? And could the 2015 Hawks really beat this year's Oklahoma City Thunder team in 4 games? Let me know in the comments. Once again, I'm Zach Langley, aka Langley ATL. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on Hawks Latest.